So we finally got around to making it back to the dyno so we can dyno the intake, the new intercooler, and the Magic igniter. If you haven't seen that, go back and watch that video. But today we're going to be going over what gains we got from this intake. And honestly, it's exactly what I was expecting. You typically don't gain much from an intake. A little bit of low end, and we'll go over why that is here in a few minutes. And why that little bit of gain makes it feel that much better. Even though the dynos were about a year apart, we were very lucky to have the same dyno conditions, essentially the same. We started around 97 degrees on the new dyno. We were at 97 degrees, the initial dyno, so around the same temperature. We ended up around 100 degrees when we finished dynoing, but that was with the new stock mouse. So for our comparison, we were at 97 degrees and 97 degrees, so we really couldn't have gotten a better comparison being so far apart. Now, if you remember from my first dyno, the car bone stock made 232 horsepower and 217 foot-pounds of torque. We did install a Catback that day, and we did not gain anything torque or power from that. So this was essentially our baseline. The AutoEXE intake gained about 3 horsepower and 9 foot-pounds of torque, which, like I said, is around what I would expect to see from an intake. Here's the overlay of the two dynos. Don't mind the very beginning of the graph. I didn't have the new dyno loaded up around 3000 like I did with the other one. That's why it starts a little bit late, but you see the boost still comes on real quick. It's one of the things I love about the sequentials, that most people who's never driven them have no idea how they feel. Now, the biggest thing to point out is the pink lines here. The solid lines are the stock dyno, and the dotted lines are the AutoEXE dyno. If you look at the pink line, that is your boost pressure. Typically, the whole reason why you feel you gain so much from an intake is because of this low-end boost increase you gain. The filters do flow a lot better than the factory filters. So if you look at the pink lines, the dotted line, you get about 1 more pound of boost, give or take, with typically early on. And that's why the torque is quite a bit higher gain than the horsepower. As you saw, we gained 9 foot-pounds of torque versus 3 horsepower. And this graph shows exactly why. You get that boost spike right there around peak torque, and that's where you feel it in the seat of your pants, and that's where everybody's like, oh yeah, this feels really good. The intake's doing a lot for me. But if you look at the rest of the graph, it's almost identical throughout. We get a little bit of gain up top, so you're flowing a little bit more, but this goes to show you that the intake is not the restriction in the system. Since we see around the same boost in the higher RPMs, that means that we're not pulling any more air because we have another restriction, and that's going to be somewhere in the exhaust. From my personal experience, all these aftermarket intakes give pretty similar results, at least on the dyno. So that's where the issue comes up of engine bay heat, and why I kind of preach what I do about the cold air intakes and the hot air intakes. On the dyno, all these different intakes are pulling in ambient because the hood's open. They're all in the same environment. Under real driving conditions, you have the hood closed. You can leave the factory ducting here, which draws air from the stock mount intercooler air duct, but that is essentially pulling air from the duct that would be going to cool the intercooler, which we already know needs as much help as possible. So this isn't the best solution. It does reduce the intake temps going to the turbos, but like I said, you're pretty much fighting a losing battle because you're stealing from one to give lower temps to the other. As you can see here, typically you seal up that little spot where the duct pulls from the intercooler duct. That way the intercooler is isolated, and then you're stuck with pulling warm air from the engine bay again. And I'm going to do some further testing on this just to demonstrate how hot it is in different areas, since I already have my setup measuring the temperature for the intercooler. Once I'm done testing the intercooler, I'm going to use the different temperature sensors and place them in different areas around the engine bay so we can get real life readings of, if you have this type of intake, here's the temperatures you'd be bringing in your filters right there rather than ambient with cold air.